Hi, and welcome back to the show. Today we are speaking with Sam Meklir of Samuel A. Meklir and Associates. Mr. Meklir has represented seriously injured victims for over 35 years. At one time, he had the highest injury verdicts in Macomb and Sinclair counties. Mr. Meklir has won multiple large verdicts and settlements in all areas of personal injury, including medical malpractice, wrongful death, construction accidents, fire, birth trauma, motorcycle, automobile, and product liability cases. Well, Mr. Meklir, thank you very much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure.
Well, first of all, I'd like to maybe get into this whole idea of medical malpractice. It's obviously a widely talked about subject, but there's still some mystery behind, how to approach this whole idea of, what happens if a doctor is negligent or does something inappropriate, during a procedure. How can you expand on that?
First of all, I think the public has to understand there have been studies that show that there are more than 100,000 people every year killed by the negligence of doctors or people in hospitals. So that's more than everybody killed in the war on Vietnam, for example. But that's every year. If somebody goes into the hospital or goes to a doctor's office, those people have an obligation to practice up to what we call the standard of practice. If they violate that, if they should run a red light, medically speaking, so to speak, then you have a case. If you have somebody go into the hospital, for example, for an outpatient procedure, and they spend 2 weeks in the hospital, generally speaking, something went wrong. And if it's investigated, we can generally find out what went wrong and whether or not the happening of this was caused by malpractice. The other thing to be concerned about in a medical malpractice case, especially in Michigan, is that we have a short statute of limitations. And statute of limitations means that you only have so long within which to start or commence your action. If you wait beyond that period of time, no matter how serious you've been injured, no matter how many people have been affected, you get no money because you've waited too long. That is a real problem in not just malpractice cases, but across the board when people have something serious or catastrophic happening in their family to themselves, because it takes them a while to get back on their feet, to start thinking straight. So they tend to wait, and that waiting can be fatal to a good case.
Well, obviously there's a lot to think about, and so I imagine they should be reaching out to you or a lawyer in general as soon as things happen.
Absolutely. People, like I say, when something serious happens, it's discombobulating for people. The breadwinner is in the hospital. The mother's no longer cooking dinner, things of that nature. One of the children needs special care. And what happens is the family is thrown into disarray. It's very important, while the evidence is fresh, to get to a good lawyer who knows how to investigate all these cases, who knows how to collect the medical records, who knows how to send out investigators while the evidence is fresh, before it gets tampered with. One of the things that we worry about in any medical malpractice case is trying to get the records quickly before the people at risk management recognize that this is a problem. And then you have the possibility that those records become altered. I'm not saying they always become altered, but in our business, it pays to be careful.
It sounds very reasonable. Let's move on to closed head injuries. I imagine that's blunt force trauma, non-bleeding scenarios. What can you say about that whole topic as far as the legal side?
Well, closed head injuries are what we're seeing now in the NFL, where these old football players, not even old football players, are having all kinds of disability and problems because of repeated head trauma. Well, the same thing can happen with one good trauma. For example, if you're in an auto accident and your auto gets hit at a high rate of speed, well, you're strapped in, but your head goes back and forth and the brain bounces back and forth against the skull. That can cause very serious brain trauma. A lot of that can be seen on MRIs or CT scans or other scans, and some of it is more subtle. And what we wind up seeing from people with closed head injuries are changes of personality, forgetfulness, short-term memory loss, the inability to remember words. All these things can be caused by an auto accident. It can be caused by a fall. It can be caused by many different things. And it's very important when somebody does have an injury that involves head trauma to get them analyzed by a neuropsychologist and other specialists in that field.
Now, what about the legal costs associated with actually, not legal, but the actual medical costs associated with going and getting that checked out? Isn't that a barrier for people to actually get checked out early on in the kind of the diagnosis phase?
Well, first of all, it depends on the insurance. If there's an automobile involved, then we have no fault here in Michigan, and the carrier has an obligation under the personal injury protection benefits to pay for the medical that's involved in the accident and pay for those injuries. It's important, therefore, that you get to a lawyer that knows exactly what he's doing in these cases, because by getting the patient to go to the doctors when he or she has a problem, you have a continuum of care, and those doctors then are in a position to better diagnose the changes in the patient's personality, in the patient's cognition, and so on, and get them to the correct specialist. So money is not the object. What is the object, though, is time, and the consistency of treatment, and understanding what makes a case worthwhile, and more importantly, what it takes to get the patient well. Because if you let these things go for too long, then it's very difficult to help the patient in the future.
Very good advice. I'm going to take a break here.